Death without fear. Could that be possible? Tonight, Venerable Robina Courtin will introduce to us this ancient wisdom that can help us live with more courage and joy. But first, an introduction. If what made a person beautiful, this one gets me, Robina, because I mean this from my heart, was their heart, you wouldn't just win Miss Universe, you would be the universe itself.
Who are you
Example,
talking to here? Me?
you
You're gonna be kidding.
exemplifying and radiating compassion until every heart felt seen. Welcome, Venerable Robina Courtin.
Okay. Denise. Hi,
Venerable
Michelle.
was born in Melbourne, Australia, raised
Okay.
Catholic, and once
That's right.
considered becoming a Carmelite nun before trading a choir robe for a Buddhist one.
That's right.
She trained as a classical singer in London in the late 1960s, fought for feminist and prisoner rights in the early 70s, and even studied martial arts before meeting her teachers Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa in 1976. By 1978, she was ordained as a Buddhist nun in Dharamsala, India, beginning a life of service that took her from editorial director of Wisdom Publications in 1987 to editor of Mandala magazine until 2000, when she left to go teach Buddhism for people like us. And she also founded the Liberation Prison Project to help death row inmates. She's guided pilgrimages through India and Nepal and Tibet, and along the way, her fierce clarity and compassion have been captured in documentaries like Chasing Buddha. With a life forged in both activism and deep spiritual seeking, she reminds us that understanding, not fear, is the path towards peace. Tonight, as she teaches, may we hold her gently as she helps us grow our courage to both live and die without fear. You can explore more of her work on her website, robinacourtin.com, and we warmly invite you to discover our upcoming classes with us at ourmetaverse.org. Welcome, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, sweetheart. Happy to see you all. Happy to see you all. So then, okay. So then what I'm going to be talking about tonight is really based on the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche in his book, which I put together, edited, and at the moment it's available from Wisdom only as in digital form because we're doing a reprint of the paperback. But it's like a handbook, basically, from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, and it's written in a chronological order, basically, of how to help your loved ones. Of course, it's addressed to helping your loved ones. Of course, it's actually clearly for yourself as well. What to do the months, the weeks, the days, the hours before death, at the time of death, and even after death. So it's a complete handbook of how to help before, during, and after death. Because of course, the unique Buddhist approach discussing the business of reincarnation. So anything I'll be saying here will be based on that. And what I'm going to do, I forgot to send it before. First courses like this, little talks like this, I put together a few excerpts from the book in some course notes on other things as well, that I'll send it to you later and you can send it to people, Denise. But I really encourage you, if you want a sort of full-on handbook with lots and lots of practice. I mean, 2/3 of it are the practices in the back, the sutras, all the different practices, the mantras, many, many, many things. I was a real fan of all the, those things. Anyway, anything I say is based on that advice of Rinpoche's. So the key thing really, I mean, if we look at Buddha's teachings, the key component that's totally relevant here is something that's not esoteric at all. It's, the very first teaching really is that Buddha's telling us that, guess what, folks, things change. And we really, I mean, we know it's evident to anybody with half a brain that things change. Pretty glasses break, bodies get old, relationships end, we all know this, but somehow it's fairly evident. If we look at all of what Buddha's saying at different levels of subtlety, he's saying that we suffer because we have misconceptions in our mind. And it's a clear thing here. He's telling us everything's impermanent, which we already know, but he says, but the trouble is, deep in our bones, even though we know it, deep in our bones is this primordial belief that things aren't, or that somehow change is wrong. We know change happens, but we just think it's wrong. Somehow it's something seems to be almost morally wrong that things change, relationships end, and how dare people die. Somehow it feels like a big mistake, you know? And so, I mean, if you look at the Buddhist teachings about emptiness, it's much way more subtle. We get confused. Even the teachings on the levels of compassion that we can cultivate are so outrageous, you almost can't believe the depth of the compassion of the bodhisattvas. But this teaching is something so basic. Okay, there are more subtle levels of impermanence that Buddha does talk about, but the very first level, the so-called kind of evident gross level of change, of impermanence, is that things literally change moment by moment. And it's really evident. We know it. But so therefore, what we've got to look at, because this is the problem, at this primordial, instinctive, absolute hate of impermanence and the wish that things don't change, at least the wish that the good things don't change. And that's the key to success. I mean, you know, forget about whether you like reincarnation or not. The real one, the real thing that enables us to be prepared for death, and there's very good reasons in Buddhism to be prepared, not just to die nicely and say goodbye to your wife and children and then you disappear down to the earth. No, to prepare for death, and this is the key thing in Lama Zopa's book, you're really preparing for the future life. Now, that's another whole kettle of fish for us often in our culture, but let's look at the practical issue of becoming familiar with impermanence, becoming familiar with the reality. How do you do that? Instinctively, primordially, we can't stand it, and we always are shocked. So how to get past, if you like, how to get past that shock that things change? So we should unpack and have a look, because I mean, by unpacking and analyzing what's in our mind, because that's what the change has to happen. We need to know, we have to understand the process, and so this is very much the Buddhist analysis, and it's strongly connected. This grasping at things as being permanent, as unchanging, as they call it in Buddhism. This intense grasping, instinctive grasping at things to not change, you know. It's also very closely linked to this intense attachment. So attachment, as we all know, one of Buddha's favorite words, is this primordial kind of emotional hunger that only wants everything to be lovely. It can only cope with everything being nice. And even a bit more brutally, it's true though, it can only cope with things being the way that I want them to be. So I always remember, and I always quote this, and it's not meant to be criticizing her. It's actually, I read an article, an interview with Nicole Kidman. This is like 30 years ago when she was with Tom Cruise, maybe 20 years ago. I remember reading it in Vanity Fair, this interview, and it was so perfect the way she said something. And as we're all familiar with it. It's not trying to criticize her, but it was just so naked talking about how they first met, are totally in love, everything. And so clearly their life was really good together. And look at this. We know sometimes in our lives things go really well. The job is good. We've got health. We've got a happy family. We've got friends, and everything feels wonderful, and how marvelous that it is, you know. But have a look how. Because what's happening is when attachment gets what it wants, which is everything to be lovely, because we're so attached to it, underneath is this feeling, this kind of unbearable to think that it will change. So what we do is we dump on top of it a lie that it'll somehow last forever. So I remember Nicole Kidman, at the end of the article, she said, "And we will be together until we are 80. Now, we know what she means exactly by that. She means, may we be together until we're 80. We love each other so much. We want to be together until we're 80. But the way we think it, when something is beautiful, we know this is true, when something is going well, what's happening is, and this is the Buddha's view, we grasp at it tremendously as having a character that means it won't change. In other words, she was convinced. So in other words, because attachment's getting what it wants, which means a good relationship, and because we absolutely desperately want it to be that way, we assume because it's good today, it'll be good tomorrow, and it'll be good till we're 80. So it's really clear it's a mistake to think this, because you know it's not true. Things change. And indeed, they didn't stay till they were 80, and people can die. I mean, we know this, but because something's delicious, and we want it to be this way, we desperately can't bear the thought that it will ever change. And it feels like we will, we will be together forever. We feel this, and it's clear if you analyze it, it's just not stable. You can't say that. It's just not true. And we know it from experience. If we do our research, no matter how much you love that beautiful cup, absolutely no way is it permanent, We know it can break. So then we think, well, okay, if I'm going to die, or if Tom could leave me, then everything's impermanent. Well, why bother? I just lie back and twiddle my thumbs and wait for him to leave me. Now, that's nihilism. That's the other extreme. So we either completely depressed and think everything's ugly and it's horrible, or we're totally in love, everything's blissful. But in both cases, we think it's permanent. And that's why, when the bubble bursts, let's say, and the beloved dies, or you start to get cancer, or your money runs out, or you lose your job, and we become devastated, and then the trouble is grasping at things as permanent now becomes unbearable, because now we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So when everything's divine, you're so perky and happy because you really believe it'll last forever. And as soon as everything goes bad, you now think that'll last forever. And that's why you want to kill yourself. So both are a trap, a real trap. And it's not really philosophical. It's practical. It's scientifically true that things change. And it's also scientifically true that we can't guarantee when they will change. We know that cups in their nature break. We know in their nature our body is disintegrating every day. We know this theoretically. We know it actually. But it doesn't mean because we're healthy, and that's also our problem. Oh, I'm young. So because I'm young and because I'm healthy, we assume I'm going to live till an old age, And if we just have to do your scientific research, we're going to find again and again, it's just simply not true. Babies die. Young people die, happy people die, healthy people die, but we just can't cope. We don't like it. We can't bear it, So that's what we've got to look at. So then how would we be if we had, the way they say it in Buddhism, if we had a realization of impermanence, if we just knew in our guts the truth of it, how would you be? You'd be much more content. I mean, the Tibetan lamas would say, just realizing the reality of impermanence, forget bodhicitta, forget emptiness, forget the high teachings, just having a genuine insight into the reality, an experiential insight into the reality of impermanence, your entire life is transformed. Because grasping at things as permanent is playing out every day in our lives and causes such pain. And this is the key point that Buddha makes. It's not something kind of like heavy. It's heavy, but it's so obvious. It's the extent to which we are not in touch with reality. That's the extent to which we suffer. So we know that when everything is going beautifully, we say, finally, I found happiness. Finally, everything's working out. And what we do is we assume because it's delicious, we put a key in it and we lock the door and we think, now I've got happiness. Now we'll be together till we're 80. Now I'm healthy. And because I'm healthy today, because money is in the bank today, because the relationship's going well today, we assume it's going to continue this way. It's just not reality. So the way to be is so how do you get to realize, for example, impermanence? I mean, this is one of the first teachings in the Tibetan tradition. The way they've structured all the teachings of Buddha is a very practical order. And the very first one, this is from Atisha in the 11th century, a little text that he wrote. It's the basis of much of the commentary in our tradition, what they call the literature of the Lam Rim, the gradual path. The very first teaching is about impermanence, but he doesn't just talk about general impermanence. He's very specific, and he homes in on the impermanence of death. And why? Because he's got like a dual agenda. It's to first realize the impermanence of everything, because then you're more realistic and you live a much better, more healthy life. But his other agenda is to get a wake-up call that when you realize that death is definite, the first point, the time of death is not definite, second point, and the third point, okay, the conclusion, what's the point at the time of death? What's useful to us? This really enables us to then increase our energy to not waste this precious life, because just the gut feeling we have life is permanent. Even if we don't think everything is so beautiful, we just think life plods along, and it's somehow, we know we're going to die, but it's a kind of like, if you think of it along your road, it's a very long way off and you never see it. You never really know when death is coming, but it feels like a long way away. And even if we're old, and I can now say I am old, it's the same feeling of being this living permanent me of 20, 30, 40 years ago is the same feeling I have now. Even though when I look in the mirror, I know I am closer to death than birth, but we just, somehow everything in our being seems to resist it, don't it? And this is so much of our pain, so much of our suffering, because we're not being realistic. So how to be realistic is, well, you have to just program your mind. Like, you've got to brainwash yourself. Program your mind every day. Part of your practice when you wake up. One of the things is you wake up and you go, wow, amazing, I'm still alive, Or when you go to bed, you think, one day, silly things like thinking I'm one day closer to death. So the general idea is to try and get a feeling of being this person who's changing moment by moment. It's true when you look in the mirror, we can see it, but we don't feel it. Everything feels very solid, doesn't it? Everything feels very concrete. Everything feels very set in stone. And that's deep in our bones, which is why it's so hard to realize this impermanence. So the point, certainly in Lama Zopa's book, being a typical Tibetan Buddhist, and the Tibetan Buddhists, Buddha always talks about reincarnation, but many Buddhists per se don't necessarily think about it because they're not interested. They don't talk about karma, but it's a really central issue in the whole Buddhist view of the universe, the whole Buddhist worldview. It's absolutely this view that there are trillions of consciousnesses, and we're not created by somebody. There's no concept of a creator. We basically create ourselves, as Dalai Lama says. Karma, the law of karma, is like self-creation, that every second of what we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. And we're producing ourselves moment by moment, and indeed we are producing the person of the next life. And in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, there are detailed instructions on how to really prepare properly so that you can pretty much have confidence at the time of your death that the right karmic seeds will be triggered that will cause you to get another decent human mother in the next life and keep on moving on your spiritual path. That's the bigger picture in Lama Zopa's book, certainly, and this is very much the bigger picture in all the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. It's absolutely changing, learning to live moment by moment in a better way, but also very consciously preparing to continue on your spiritual path after you die, not just leaving it up to the lap of the gods and crossing your fingers, but knowing that we are in charge of this process. We are our own creators. This is the big shocking thing in Buddhism. If we're good Christians, the prayer is that if you're a good person, God will reward you, but here there's no one rewarding us except ourselves. So there's different levels of it. And I noticed too in the West, there's so many, these last years I've been traveling around and doing courses on this topic. More and more people in the West now, it's very wonderful, really, are confronting the concept of death more. More and more people are choosing to work with dying people. It's wonderful. I remember one conference in Australia at these young people electing to work in this environment of death and dying. I think it's wonderful. And of course, that's the materialist view, to try and help the people, the families, the loved ones be more content and more fulfilled and not so afraid of death, so that the person dies happily and the family can move on, which is so practical. I remember one time in Sydney too, one wonderful doctor at the Children's Hospital, there's a big children's hospital in Sydney. And he's really was working so hard to help people deal with the pain of dying children. That's the worst one. And we can't even bear the thought of children dying, And I went to a conference there and it was so moving. And he was just trying to help parents deal with the pain of it, not make it such an ugly subject. And he had the morgue. I remember the morgue for the dead babies and dead children in the hospital. He decorated it like a nursery, and the doors were open. So one time he mentioned there's this one little boy, walking in and out of the morgue. He said, "Come and meet my dead brother," making it so much more open, which I think is all of this helps, confront this thing that we can't stand to think about, because there really is so much fear. So even just breaking down the taboos around death and the fear of death can already be tremendously powerful, because we know that that fear is one of the worst things. And that just increases our own fear of that time when death will come. And we can also see how hard it is when we know that someone's so-called dying. I mean, no one who wants to know about a dying person? Nobody. You don't want to even talk about it. So no one knows how to talk to somebody if they're called dying. I mean, as Lama Zopa says it, it's like ridiculous. It's true. We divide the whole world into living people and dying people. But it's so absurd. Because as he says, obviously, evidently, living people die before dying people every day. It's just sort of, it's not even a joke, but we can't bear to think. We have these vivid labels, a dying person. And if you hear about Auntie Jane has got cancer, oh, really? She's dying. We don't even want to talk to Auntie Jane because you're too embarrassed to talk about it. I mean, so that's why even just getting rid of the fear around it. And then, I mean, because the person who's dying, because they've got cancer, exactly the same status as me, who doesn't have cancer, but I'm called a living person. So somehow Robina's got a life, and you can talk in a relaxed way because she's got a life. She'll be here tomorrow. What a joke. Living people really do die before dying people every day. I remember a friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, Frank. He was on death row. They're all preparing for their death. But leukemia got him first, but somehow it's like our minds are so full of these misconceptions, which cause us to have all this fear. We can't even bear other people's death. So it's just learning to confront the reality of it, because it's literally is part of life. And this already can calm us down. And then we'll at least be able to start actually knowing that, and this is talking in the Buddhist view, forget the materialist view, that we can prepare for death. Many people do in the way of writing wills and ordering your coffin and writing all the eulogy talks and things. That's fine, that's good. But the Buddhist one is preparing your mind. So let's look at it from that point of view, okay? And of course, all this advice in Lama Zopa's book is framed in terms of helping your loved one. It needs to be that, but it's absolutely obvious it's for oneself, it's very clear. So the key thing to understand in the Buddhist view is this view of karma, that everything we think and do and say is the very process that produces the person I am, moment by moment. So even just this, okay, there's two main things. There's one, preparing for death in the way you live your life, and the other one is actually things you need to do at the time of death. And they're very distinct levels of practices, So let's look at the first one in general is becoming familiar with impermanence, recognizing the reality, telling yourself every day that you're an impermanent person and death could come at any time, but not in any fearful way, but in a practical way. And the key benefit of this isn't, oh, well, I'm going to die, why bother? No, it's the exact opposite. It gives you a sense of not wanting to waste your life. And I think this is really, clear, It's like, if you've got it's like a joke. If you've got a deadline, it's a very good way to say it. If you've got a deadline on some project, or you've got a flight to catch tonight at 11 o'clock, think about this. It's the morning, right? And you've got a flight at 11 o'clock. This is really the good point. That everything you do that day has to be something that'll help you get ready to get your flight at 11 o'clock. Can you imagine starting to paint the kitchen walls at noon, or learning to have a big argument with your husband about something and call the lawyer at 1 o'clock? You'd say, don't be ridiculous. You've got a priority. And this is the way to put it. If you know you're impermanent, but you don't know when you're going to die, it's like you don't know when your flight is, you're going to be on the case every day. You're going to be alert. You're going to be referring to it. And as soon as you realize, and even when you really understand impermanence, you're going to start with your sister, fighting with your sister, and you think, what's ridiculous? What a waste of time. Life is precious. And you think life is precious insofar as therefore you don't want to waste it. And this is such the practical benefit of remembering impermanence, not to be dreading it, but confronting the reality of it. And the key one is you don't even know when. And that is a real truth, So having this view energizes you not to waste your life. It homes you in to prioritize what's important. Okay, to get ready for your flight, you've got to pack your bag and blah, 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 and call the taxi. But here, what's important? How do you prioritize? What are you prioritizing here? in order to be ready for death? Well, from the Buddhist perspective, you're prioritizing practicing virtuous thoughts, saying virtuous words, and doing virtuous actions. Because by having negative thoughts, getting upset, getting angry, getting depressed, buying into the rubbish, being stubborn, angry, upset, jealous, proud, rubbish, and lying and stealing and killing, that's just going to tip you down the toilet and cause negative karma to be triggered at the time of your death, which causes you to have a suffering future rebirth. I mean, what a joke. How silly to do that. But that takes time to get if we don't have the view of karma. But if you do, then you realize you've got no choice but to make the most of every day. And making the most of every day is practicing good ethics, being a good person, because that programs you and it prepares you for death anyway, because your mind will be more relaxed. If you spend your life being angry and depressed and jealous and fearful, death will be the most appalling experience that you could ever imagine, because you'll completely live in denial of it. Whereas if you're confronting the reality of death, knowing you're going to die, then the conclusion is, I must not waste my life. And how do you do that? Not just by walking up Mount Everest and buying all your lovely things, but by changing your mind, becoming a happy person, practicing virtue, practicing goodness, purifying your mind every day, doing your practice. So you're programming your mind in a positive way. So when death does come, it won't be fearful. This is sort of, I think it's quite practical. So first on that point, and just ask me some questions about that, and then we'll go into the death process itself, because it's quite fascinating how they describe the actual process of death. And I can tell you where to read about this and everything, because it's most fascinating, especially in the Tibetan tradition. In the Vajrayana teachings, they have very detailed descriptions of the actual death process and how to prepare for it. But let's first have some questions about anything in general, if you'd like. If you haven't got, I can continue.
Venerable, you started with, thank you so far. You started with death is indefinite, the time of death is indefinite, and there was a third point.
Yeah, okay, let's go through that. Okay, let's go through those. This is really the framework to use, okay? So the first point to really contemplate is that death is definite, that I am a dying, so basically I'm a dying person, you don't have to say it like that, but to yourself it's helpful. It's very funny, even in the 12 links of dependent arising, there's classical teachings of the Buddha about the different stages, how this leads to this, which leads to that, which leads to this, and then finally, the first one is never mind, but the last one is death. But what's interesting is, in terms of rebirth, the last of these 12 links is old age, sickness. They call it old age and death, right? That's the last one. So what's so curious that then they say, once you've got your new rebirth, the first second is conception in your mother's womb. The egg and sperm come together, your mind joins with it, and when you jump into the new mother's egg and sperm at the time of conception, they say the first moment is that, then the second moment of conception is the beginning of the process of death. You understand that? And it's not wrong. If you think about it, it's sort of like you're just beginning to grow into this person, but it's already counting down. The second moment is the beginning of the process of death, technically, the way they describe it, which is kind of hilarious, So, okay, let's look. This first point is that death is definite. So contemplating that, how would you do that? Every time the practical way, in your daily life, everybody knows that the death is definite. You see the ant, you see the dog. But when it's close, I mean, like, okay, today, many people have been completely shocked by that young man being killed, and because it's such a volatile topic, because it's politics, there he was, you think about it, there he was, 31, apparently I've heard about it, I haven't read much about him, a wonderful human being.
Charlie Kirk is his
That's
name.
right, very earnest, very sincere, a good man in his own way, really trying hard to help make the world a better place, and he's 31, young, vibrant. And what happens, I mean, we know all these things, we know it, but it's always a shock. So if you could argue that, anyway, never mind. So the first one is that death is definite. And that is a simple scientific fact. So then, and that already that is going to be arguing with the instinctive feeling I'm permanent, But the second one is really very powerful. So, okay, you how you apply that in daily life, you notice every time you hear about an animal dying, you hear about that man dying. Okay, we can have compassion or we can be angry. But the other teaching is, look, death's definite. You remind yourself. And then the real practice is, that'll be me. That'll happen to me. Because I think very strongly we know death is true, but it's a long way over there. It's never me. It's always someone else dies. it's almost like, oh, thank God I'm not in the dying group. I'm a living person. It's okay. Phew. But it's the only time it ever gets closer to home is if it's a close family or beloved or your special pet. Then we really feel the pain of it, but still we don't get the lesson. And the real lesson is, and that's the one we have to apply every time you read about death, you think about it, you just say, okay, that's going to be me one day. I'll be on that side. I'll be one of the dying, it'll happen to me. Because you just have to counteracting these instinctive misconceptions. The only way you start to do that is by counteracting them at the grossest level possible. Every time you see about death, you read about it, you go, that'll be me. It's the most powerful way to do it. It catches you right there, and you just then use it as a wake-up call. Now, the second one, the time of death is uncertain. The time of death, and this too is technically true. Even, my friend on death row, even if anybody's going to be certain about their death, you could argue it's someone on death row. They've got a date, or supposedly a date, more than anybody else. But leukemia got him first, And always almost like a joke, a friend of mine in Los Angeles, he went to Los Angeles to help his father die of cancer. Well, he got better. This is literally true. He got better. The father got better. And they had a party cheering and rejoicing and celebrating Daddy's good health. Next day, he died of a heart attack. I mean, it's sort of like a joke. You'd say it as a joke, but it's just to remind us, And the more we catch our language, the more we read things, we're going to hear it the whole time. There's always an assumption of permanence. If you're young, if you're healthy, I mean, it's not as if you have to walk around all the time saying, oh, I could die today. Just shut up and mind your own business and be normal, please. But having it in our bones, knowing it's a reality, can shift everything in your mind. But you still act normal. I'll see you next week. You don't have to say, oh, well, unless I die, you don't have to say that. But in your mind, you would know that's true. Then it gives you this fresh energy. So the first one, death is definite. It'll happen to me. And especially when it's closer to home, we have the grief and the loss, and that's fine to have that, but it's not the lesson. The lesson is that'll be me. And then that gives us some energy. So, but the second one, the time of death, that's the one that really gets closer. It gets us closer to home, But we have to really think about that because it's too hard. Because if the time of death is uncertain, then it's not illogical to say I could die today. So one of the ways, Lama Zopa always says it, and I try to do it every day, and our minds are very thick, is to say I will die today. Best to think I'll die today. It's like my flight is going to be today. And it used to be one day when you do standby flights, you get special prices, wouldn't you, for standby flights? But you never knew when the standby flight would come. So you always have to act as if it'll come today. And then it won't. It might be tomorrow. So that if you think about death like that. And I remember vividly when Steve Jobs died, I remember I love that man so much. He knew he was dying. He had cancer, and you could see from the talks he gave, he's obviously really processing this whole business of impermanence. And the day he died, his his sister, who was a writer, they said, come quickly, and she said when I forget, I remember reading what she said in some talk she gave. She said he was packed, ready to go. He was packed, ready to go. So his mind was ready. And she said it was very moving, the way he was with his children, with his daughters. He was looking at them with incredible love, begging them to forgive him for leaving them. He wasn't like full of fear and panic and grasping and crying, but really had come to terms with it. And you could see it from how he used to write. So he was true, as she said, it was a wonderful way to put it. He was packed, ready to go. His mind was ready. He accepted impermanence, and he kept trying to get healthy, but he knew at some point had failed, so he was ready. His mind was ready, and he died apparently very peacefully, So it's sort of like this is the real benefit. So the time of death is uncertain is simply a fact, and the one we just cannot bear to think about. It's too close, it's too close because because this. So here's me, the supposed Buddhist nun, who's supposed to talk about this stuff all the time. And I did this book of Lama Zopa's years ago, and I do many courses on it. And being a Buddhist, of course, I think about it, meditate on it. But still, our minds are as thick as posts. I say all these words every day, and intellectually, I'm very convinced, and I try to practice every day. But the mistake in the mind, this is how Buddhism talks, is so primordial. That even though it's staring, the truth of it is there, it's still hard to believe it. When I go to bed every night, I have a particular practice I do to help me, realize I'm one day closer to death. I hit the pillow and I say to myself that if I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be delighted I'm still alive. And when I do wake up in the morning, I remember straight away, look, I'm still alive. I didn't die last night. And many people who went to bed, if you did your market research, if you did a market research within a 50-mile radius, I guarantee there'd be many people who did not think they were dying, who won't wake up in the morning. But that's not research we ever like to do, but it's a fact. We can see it every time. So I try to do that every day, but still, even as I do it, I'm preparing for the next day. I'm looking forward to my breakfast, It's so deep in us to really get the truth of it. But at least if we say the words intellectually. So the first is the time of death is certain, definite. Everyone who's alive is, and you can do your analysis, are all, after 100 years, whatever, blah. Second one, the time of death, you just got to look at that and look at the thing, always as we call the surprising deaths. The babies die, healthy people die, happy people die. The number of times in hospitals when people who are not healthy, who are not unhealthy, and who are young, who die, they put for no medical reason. They don't know what to say because it's not. Whereas if you understand karma, there are reasons why, karmically, that you're literally your petrol tank of morality. Because okay, well, that's maybe I haven't got much time to go into all the details about karma, but this death can be, if you're clairvoyant, like these holy beings are, you can see when someone's going to die because you know how much is in the gases in their tank. It's like that, literally. That's why in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition we have lots of practices where we can extend our long life by doing extra practices. Various Buddhas related to long life. There's a very strong kind of emphasis among the practices because you can put a bit more gas in the tank. Things like that. So the time of death just needs to be all the time to remind, and because we have to remind ourselves, but because it's so scary, because if it is true, the time of death is uncertain, then it's logical that I could die today. That's why Lama Zopa says it's best to think, just to practice thinking quietly, well, I could die today and be ready for it. My flight could go tonight. Be ready for it. Of course, we're looking forward to the flight, but we're not looking forward to death, right? But just to practice becoming familiar, not facing the fear, looking it in the eye, hearing it. So then as soon as you say that, then you think, oh, okay, then what would I do? If I were going to die tonight, if I were on death row, they'd come and get me at midnight, you'd think about it. You'd be focused totally on what's important, your own mind, or whatever it is. I remember one time, one guy on death row, one of the people I knew, and he had permission. He had his death. He had a death date, or is in the calendar. And so he was a Buddhist, and you could see when he had permission to talk to some of us on the phone. And I had a conversation with him like about a week before he was ready to die. You could see he was, really totally focused on that day. He knew because he was committed to his practice, there was no point in worrying about insurance. There's no point in worrying about how fat he was. There's no point in worrying about what food he eats. There's no point in worrying all the things that normally preoccupy our lives, Suddenly, your focus is complete, just like you got the flight tonight. Everything is prioritized. Who cares if the toilet's falling over? Who cares if someone else is doing this? You've got to get your flight. Such a simple example. But when he was so focused and he was extremely joyful, completely content, very happy. He was a very amazing guy, He was so clearly focused on this event, preparing for it, to have his mind be happy when he died. And this is why in the book, the emphasis, it's called How to Help Your Loved Ones. No, it's not. It's called now How to Face Death Without Fear. And it's all framed in terms of helping your loved ones be prepared for death. And so this is where I haven't even given any advice, but we'll say the third point before we get there. So this time of death is uncertain. So that really gives you the wake-up call. And so then the third point is, well, at the time of death, what's important? What do you want? If Steve Jobs was packed, ready to go, what do you want to put in your bag? What do you want to be ready? In other words, what is important at the time of death? Well, this is a Buddhist view. It's very clear, Given a series of things, given that your consciousness, your mind, didn't begin in your mother's womb, didn't come from a creator, and is not made by anybody else, but came from a previous life programmed into your mother's womb. So your consciousness, given your consciousness goes back and back. Second, given that your consciousness will leave this body and take another body, this is just the nature of the karmic view. Given that, this is the karmic one, every second of what you think and do and say sows seeds in your mind that will ripen in the future life, either. So then, given that a negative seeds ripen as future suffering, a future suffering rebirth, like animal or something, future negative tendencies continue to do then be born with the tendency to kill, steal, lie, whatever. Future experiences of being harmed or hurt by others. I mean, just look at the world, look at the suffering of the world. And a bad environmental result. There are four main results of karma: the type of rebirth, your tendencies, your experiences at the hand of others, and even the physical world, how it impacts upon you. So given that negative actions sow seeds in the mind that will ripen as suffering results of those four, and given that positive seeds put into your mind from practicing virtue, being kind, consciously not killing, consciously not lying, living a good life, doing your best to be a benefit to others as well, that those seeds will ripen in the future as a good rebirth, like another human birth, good tendencies, good experiences, and good environment. I mean, in a sense, it's a no-brainer. Who doesn't want a happy experience in the future? And given that we are in charge of this, it's not punishment and reward. There's no punisher and rewarder in Buddhism. It's up to us to sow the seeds in our garden so that we'll have a future fruits. We're the ones who create the future. So given that our mind comes from before and will leave after this birth, death, given that everything we think and do and say programs us, given that negative programming causes my future suffering and positive programming causes my future happiness, and finally, no brainer, given that I want future happiness, then it goes without saying that at the time of death, the only thing that's of any use to me is what's in the virtuous tendencies and the virtuous seeds in my mind. That's it. That's what you pack your bag with. Your body's not helpful. Your beloveds are not helpful. Your house is not helpful. Your pension plan is not helpful. We all know these words, but it's really good to say it to ourselves, that they are not useful. They're not helpful. When you got to pack your bag to go, this is a silly analogy, but it's a good one. If you have to pack your bag, if your house is burning and you have to pack your bag and leave, you take with you what's useful. The rest you have to leave. This is such a classic example, So this is the attitude. So that doesn't mean you have to give up your husband and give up your money and give up your body. No. But you realize they're like a dream. You have them, you make the most of them, and on the basis of your kindness and virtue and patience and love and compassion to others, you enjoy your family, you adore your husband, you love your children, knowing they're gone like a dream and you're ready to let them go when the time comes. This is an intense practice, and this is a way to become more happy now, because you're realizing impermanence and you're giving up attachment and giving up anger and giving up neuroses, So it's such a powerful, it's a grounding. I mean, emptiness is more abstract for us. Bodhicitta is so high, but this impermanence is so kind of down to earth, So the three, death is definite, time of death is uncertain, and the only thing that's of use at the time that breath stops is the virtue in your own mind, because that programs you. And then in a minute, we can go through the death process and explain what happens. So you're clear, Denise?
Yes, thank you.
So I think let's talk quickly about how to help others, because that's what the main point in the book. So we see ourselves. I mean, I think Lama Zopa says, actually, and this is very surprising, of course, but it's it's the Buddhist view. He says, if you want to help anybody in their life, when they need you most is at the time of death. This is very shocking for us, because as far as if we have a materialist view of the world, death is like who cares, because you're going to be dead soon. But the whole Buddhist approach is this life is over. All the karma you created in the past that ripens at the time of conception in your mother's womb then you play out those karmic seeds in this life. That's all over. It's all finished. Each time a new experience comes, that seed is finished. So everything you do now that sows new seeds in your mind, they're going to be the ones that ripen at the time of, that are triggered at the time of death. So death is such an important time. And what that means basically is the way to die well is to die with confidence, to die with courage, to die with not grasping and not fear, no grasping, no attachment, but having lived a good life is 90% of the battle, with awareness of impermanence. But at the time of death, how you can help your loved ones, if they haven't lived their life in a nice way, you can help them come to terms with this reality. And everything you do for that dying person in the months and weeks and days before death, everything you do in relation to them is only to help them be two things: peaceful and virtuous. Because when the mind is peaceful, the mind can be virtuous. You think about it, when you're peaceful, you can be more loving, more kind, more patient. But when you're unpeaceful, when you're freaking out, everything goes berserk. You can't be anything. You're just overwhelmed by yourself. So it's to help a person, and this is including your animals, help them be peaceful. And so there's, of course, Rinpoche being a Buddhist, there's so many practices he recommends. He loves all his mantras. There's so many different sutras, different things you can read, different meditations to do, and all the practices he recommends are all numbered in the back from 1 to 90. And there's all kinds of practices. But I mean, even just one of them, he said, if you want to do any practice at all, you just do the medicine Buddha mantra. You say it in the ears of your loved one or in the ears of your little pet, because this can have a strong impact upon your loved one's mind. So the key thing in the very beginning, in terms of taking care of your loved ones, is to make the environment as peaceful as possible. Make the room beautiful. Many people, I think sick rooms and rooms where dying people are usually really ugly, But if the person's going to be dying, like a friend of mine, a nun who's my age, actually, a friend of mine, she lived for years in India. She was in Australia briefly seeing some family, and she went to the hospital, and she had cancer. She was going to be dead in a month. So Lama Zopa said, nothing much to do. It doesn't seem any indications that you can get better. So get ready for death. So she found this beautiful place in Queensland, like with beautiful open rooms with lovely gardens and sky and space, because we've got senses, So if you're living in a room, think about it, if you're dying or sick and you're in an ugly old room with machines and noise and other people crying, this is why, with respect to dear doctors and nurses, dying in a hospital is about the worst place to die, because the mind, as you're dying, as you get older and sicker and dying, the mind becomes incredibly sensitive. The tiniest noise can be so distressing to your mind. So the most crucial thing is to have peace and quiet. And then, like my friend, so Trisha, the nun, she went to this place, she opened her eyes, she'd see the sky. So when you see the sky and the space, the mind can be more relaxed, isn't it? It's so important. So the room should be beautiful. Everything in there should be conducive for that person to be peaceful. Having pleasing sounds, the sounds of mantras maybe, and instead of ugly and dark and noisy. And that's why, it's got to be peaceful. More than anything, Lama Zopa's only thing that goes on in that room are things that are useful for the dying person, which is prayers to hear, mantras to hear. Everything's peaceful, quiet, low key. You keep the troublemakers out. You keep even the pets, because that can just energize so much attachment in people. That's surprising to us because we think attachment's love. But if you're really attached to your pussycat and you're really attached to those children or that person, that'll just freak you out at the time of death. You try to help the person be very calm, and attachment is about the worst thing, to help them be really relaxed and quiet. So then, and throughout the process is to learn to be, to know, like I say, if your loved ones are Buddhist, then to read their practices to them, read this particular mantra, do whatever is beneficial. If your mummy's a Catholic, you talk about God to your mother, you remind her about, what a lovely person she's been, you tell her good qualities, because we all know all we do is think about our negativity. We need to be reminded of our good things. So if you remind your mummy what a good mummy she's been, how kind she was, she can lift herself and be more open. Tell her about God instead of worrying, because attachment is the main thing at death, that we're clinging on to this life, we're clinging on to this body, and this is the worst painful way to die. So you use that energy and you tell her that, to look forward to going to heaven. Tell her that God is God in heaven and God loves you. So she can shift her energy from clinging to this body to looking forward to going to heaven. Her mind can be more relaxed. There's just many skillful ways to help a person's mind be calm, relaxed. You're very patient with them. You're very loving. You only say appropriate, useful words. You praise them. You uplift them. You know, it's so important. And even if they're in a coma or going to sleep and all the time, don't think that they can't hear you, because the subtle level of mind is very receptive at the time of death, you know, especially with animals as well. So even if they're in a coma, you be very quiet. Always have mantras playing, prayers playing, because they can still hear it. I mean, I've got many experiences of that. You know, the Buddhist view of the mind. I'll go into the death process in a minute. How are we going for time? We're okay. The way they describe it in the Vajrayana system, in the Tantrayana system, we've got gross consciousness or mind, those words are the same, and that's our senses, it's obvious, and that's linked to this physical body. So we know that when you get very sick or you're half asleep or you're in a coma, the grosser level, your sensory consciousness and your body stop ceasing. They cease functioning, don't they? But your subtle consciousness, which is all your thoughts and your feelings, and that's your dream mind, and that can be very vivid. When you're in a coma, you're basically, that's your dream mind, which is your subtle mind. It's all your mental states, the same as all your emotions, but they're more subtle, and you're very receptive. You can be looking like, you know, yourself. You can be, I remember one time when I had it, and I was, what was it? That's right, during a retreat one time. We in India, it was 3 months retreat and meditate every day. And then we'd have a little nap in the lunchtime. And I remember very vividly for about a week, I was asleep and dreaming, but they were crystal clear dreams. What do they call it? Lucid dreams. Lucid dreams, which is my subtle consciousness, but I could hear everything. I could hear whatever's going on in the kitchen and all the people talking. And that's very common experience for people in a coma. I remember one Italian mother, she kept her son wired up for 25 years. He was looking like he was brain dead. He came out of his coma and he said he was conscious the whole time. He heard and saw everything for 25 years. Can you imagine that? So this very vivid, so when you're sick or you're dying or you're in a coma, you can also be very conscious, and therefore you can help people. So I remember this one woman who was in a coma in a hospital in Sydney, and her husband asked me to go and just be there. I'd go, it was the ER. She was totally unconscious. And I was given permission to go there. They said I was a Buddhist nun. And when I got there, they said, please don't ring any bells. So I promised I wouldn't ring any bells. So she was lying in bed, wired up. Her name was Judy, totally unconscious, and I just started saying mantras in her ear every now and again. And also, she was a student of two of the lamas, so I'd ask the students to ask the lamas to pray for Judy. And I remember saying every now and again in Judy's ear, I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen's praying for you. Judy, Tsongtsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. I'd say those words very quietly. She came out of a coma weeks later, and I went to see her, and she said the only thing she remembered, and no one had told her because I hadn't told anybody what I did, including her husband. She said the only thing she could remember was this husky voice. She said she thought it was a blue lady coming through the window saying exactly those words. Now, I'm sorry, you can't argue with things like that, you know. This is showing, especially when you're sick, you can be very sensitive and very impressionable. So even a person's in a coma, and your animals as well, that's the best time to play mantras, because it goes in more deep, and that can hook the energy of the Buddhas to bless them and help them, you know. So it's a very, very strong, that one's very particular. So help your loved ones in this way, whatever you can, and treat them with love, kindness, patience, and optimism, you know, and be useful to them in this way, lifting them up. So important. And animals as well, you know, instead of just going killing your animals, which is we all tend to do, let your animal die peacefully by having mantras playing that can help the little mind. You know, there's so much. I mean, this is also part of our fear, I think. We can't bear the thought of our animals dying, so we go off and kill them. You know, the poor veterinarians these days, they spend their lives killing animals. It's really sad. So the other one, especially about being,
Venerable.
yeah, go on, talk to me, ask
We have
questions.
a hospice director on our board of directors at Our Mettaverse, and he says, you know, I wish instead of when the family that can't be there or are there, kept saying, "Don't worry about this. You got it. Hang in there." He wishes they would say, "You've done a good job. It's okay
That's
for
it.
you to
No,
go."
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I know that's exactly right. Because once you're dying, at certain stages, you can come back to life. There are many, many stories we know of people who stop breathing, but the karma hasn't finished, so they come back to life. They didn't actually die. And we'll discuss the death process in a minute, and I'll explain the process. But once it's starting, it's inexorable. So the worst thing possible is to be screaming and yelling. I always remember hearing that Frank Sinatra, when he died, his wife was screaming, "Frank, Frank, hold on, hold on." I mean, this must be the worst nightmare. Like you fall off the cliff and they're saying, "Hold on." I mean, it's the worst thing for your mind. That will be the most traumatic thing for your mind. And this is the point about the death process. So let me go through the death process just briefly now. It's hard to retain. There's a lot of information. But anyway, you've got these levels of mind: gross consciousness, which is sensory; subtle consciousness, which is your thoughts and feelings, but especially when it's more subtle, like the dream mind or the coma mind. And then you've got what they call very subtle. So it's this gradual deconstruction process, and the ways to meditate on this. And this is a crucial practice in all the Vajrayana, and all the greatest yogis spend their lives practicing this so that they're ready for the time of death, because the whole goal is to be able to get to the very subtle level, the subtlest level of your mind, so that you can then meditate at that level and get realizations and even get enlightened at that point. There's all sorts of technical teachings about that. But anyway, the process of the death roughly is described in terms of 8 stages. And it's this gradual deconstruction of all the components of the person. So the first 4 stages is like the earth element ceasing, the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the 5 senses, right? And the different elements. So they describe all those. So by the time you've stopped breathing, your eyes have gone, ears have gone, nose, tongue, taste, smell, and your grosser level of conceptuality. By the time you stop breathing, you've lost the plot. You have no idea who you are, what's happened. You don't remember friends, enemies, strangers. Your mind is gradually deconstructed. And this is the period when it's so important that the person's peaceful. Because literally at about the second of these 4 stages, by the time your eyes begin to go and your memory's beginning to go, at this point is when a particular karmic seed from your billions of karmic seeds in your bank vault, everything we think and do and say drops karmic seeds into our mind. And at the time you start the death process, about the second of the 4 stages is when the particular karmic seed that will be determining what kind of future life you will get is already triggered. So that's the period when you need to be, and that's when a lot of grasping and fear arises. And that's the time to be really helping your loved one be peaceful, like literally metaphorically holding their hand to be peaceful and calm, playing their practices, playing mantras, whatever it is that helps them. That's the crucial time for your pet as well. So by the time you get to the 4th stage, you look like you're dead. And what's interesting also, this process of death is exactly the same as the process of going to sleep. It's identical, except obviously death is more radical. So by the time you stop breathing, and the time you go to sleep and your senses have ceased, that's equivalent to this process, but it's more dramatic at death because your breathing actually stops, Then the next 4 stages are the deconstruction of the various components of your mental consciousness, your various thoughts and feelings. And there's a particular level of physical energy there as well. They talk about all the 72,000 subtle channels, all the wind energy that courses through those channels, the various chakras, all this. It's very detailed descriptions of this subtle physical energy and the subtle mental level, and the process happening there, ever more subtle, deconstructing until the point where the mind gets to what they call the very subtle level, or the clear light mind, which is very subtle, and it's at the heart chakra. They describe in great detail. And so then when that leaves, that's death. And that could be up to 3 days after you've stopped breathing. That's why it's so crucial for Tibetan Buddhists. Once you've stopped breathing, you're not dead yet. You've got up to 3 more days. Your mind can, very rarely more than 3 days, your mind can still be in the body, but there's no evidence of it. So this is why the whole business of giving organs is a very interesting discussion. There's a chapter about this in the book. Because for the materialist view, you are dead when you stop breathing. Your brain dead, the heart doesn't work, the brain doesn't work, so there's no physical indication of life. But the Tibetan view is very clear, that the Vajrayana view, sorry, is very clear that the subtle consciousness is still there. And the fact is, one of the ways of proving that, if the person has been there for a couple of days, if you put your hand above the center of the chest, which is where the heart chakra is, if the mind is still there, it'll be vividly warm. The rest of the body will be cold. But as long as the mind is there, it'll be vividly warm around the heart chakra. And the same for animals, you know. So anyway, by the time you stop, so the problem with the organs is very interesting. There's this book I read while I was editing Lama Zopa's book by an American journalist, a medical journalist called Nick Teresi, and he's a very funny fellow. And it was called The Undead, and he was quite cynical about the profession of organ, that one, and whatever. But he's a very interesting man. But he had all these stories in there, and he's an atheist himself. But he had a whole chapter, for example, on out of body experiences while people were having a procedure in the hospital, you know. And so there's one particular, and many people reporting how they see what's going on. The regular medical profession doesn't believe it, but he had one story of one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that from their point of view, there was no way there could be any awareness of any kind. They had to stop all her organs, you know. But she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. She told them exactly what they said, the music they played, and you just can't argue with these things, you know. So anyway, that's the Buddhist point, is that's your subtle consciousness, and you can be in the same way that I was very conscious during my sleep and my dream of what was happening on the outside world. That can also happen while people are in comas. And it can also happen, like I talked about that man, but it also can happen while you're supposedly dead, because your mind hasn't left yet. Your subtle consciousness is still there. So in this book, he had this very interesting report on one woman who was giving her organs. You know, as soon as you stop breathing, they keep you breathing. So as Lama Zopa says in the book, if you can continue to breathe, even artificially, that means your mind has to be there. Because remember, the Buddhist view, the consciousness is not physical. We're not discussing the brain here. We're discussing your consciousness, you know. So this woman, she is being kept alive, you know. She's on the operating table. So think the Buddhist view, her consciousness is still there. And the nurse who was monitoring the heartbeat said that the moment they got the circular saw to cut her open from head to toe to remove her organs, her heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. So, and he made a joke, I wonder what a dead person has to worry about. But my analysis, based on the Buddhist view, is she's having this so-called out-of-body experience, which is possible because your mind is still there, just like a person in a coma. So she basically knows she's still alive. She's seeing them with the circular saw, and she's freaking out. I'm not dead yet, she's thinking, and they're cutting me open. Well, that can be very traumatic for her, because that can trigger a negative karmic seed. And when she does die, that can cause her to get a suffering rebirth. So that's the real danger Lama Zopa talks about. It's the danger for the person who's dying, that if they do have an awareness while they're while they're having their organs taken, it can be freaking them out. And she's a perfect example of that. Many people, it won't happen, you know. It won't happen for them. They'll be fine. And so he says, you need to be careful. Are we communicating here? I'm saying a lot of things, but are we communicating? So, I mean, I got second thoughts about now, not that people want my old organs, but about giving organs now. And he was quite cynical about it. I mean, maybe it's changed, because kind of the ruthlessness of the profession, people manipulating people. I mean, in Europe now, the default law is that you will give your organs if you die. You have to actually consciously say that you don't want to give your organs. It used to be the other way around. So it's very wicked in many ways. It's very manipulative, you know. This is what he was saying as a medical journalist. I'm just repeating.
So I didn't tell you this, Venerable,
Yeah.
but last week we did near-death experiences. What was our class?
Oh, I see. How interesting. That's good, isn't it? That's very
And
interesting.
we did a video of all these examples of
There you
different
go.
things.
There you go.
And actually,
Yeah.
one person in our class has had one and shared
Fun, yeah.
firsthand.
There you go. See, this is where it would be described very particularly, as I'm saying, but in the Vajrayana, obviously other people have different explanations, but this is the explanation from the Buddhist perspective, that your mind is still there, and that's a subtle level of mind. And when that's why we think the mind is the brain, then this just doesn't work. I remember one doctor in this business, he was quoted in this book saying, "I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but I can say that." And that's why I think these experiences are really good. And for this man who himself has no view about this, he's an atheist, but he reported all these things. And I think it's very important that now more and more there's these discussions, you know. I remember the Dalai Lama with all these discussions the last 40, 50 years of the scientists and people. And at a certain point, they were really working on developing machinery to put on the bodies of dead yogis who, from the Buddhist perspective, are in meditation, not dead. Do you understand? So try to see if we can identify some subtle evidence of a subtle level of mind. So at least people are interested in trying to do this, which I think is great, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions? No?
Hi, thank you, Robina. My name's
Good,
Jane.
darling.
I'm in Australia at the moment.
Yes, Jane.
Um,
How are you going?
My niece's boyfriend died last week, had a catastrophic head injury. He was 19 years
Oh,
old.
sweetheart.
His mum and dad had to switch his machine off.
Say it again, darling. There
And
were. Say
his
what?
mum
Say it
and
again.
dad, he had a catastrophic brain
Yes.
injury from a
Yes.
motorbike
Yes.
accident.
Yes.
He was kept alive for a couple of days because
Yes.
his brother and sister had to come and see him before he
Yes.
passed.
Yes.
And they harvested his organs because he was
Yes.
young and
Yes,
healthy.
of course. That's right. Wonderful.
Yeah, so I know I was previously an RN, so I've got mixed thoughts
Of course, darling.
on body harvesting.
Of course.
So my question is, do you think that the consciousness that's in the organs would travel? I know there's lots of anecdotal evidence and evidence to say that the consciousness will travel into the person that it's been
Okay.
transferred to.
I understand, Jane. It's a really good question, darling. No, the Buddhist analysis would be this. All I can give you is what the analysis would be. Is very clear that consciousness, so this beloved boy, what was his name?
Caden,
Caden.
yeah.
Caden, okay. So there's Caden's consciousness. And he had this catastrophic accident. His grosser level of being ceased, his brain ceased, his heart ceased. They kept him alive for a couple of days. So then they cut his organs out. So the fact is, the body, in the Buddhist view, is very clear that the body and the mind, or consciousness, are, on the one hand, inextricably linked, but they're utterly separate. And the consciousness can't be kind of split up. You can split up the pieces of the body, for sure, give a heart to one person and a liver to someone else, but the consciousness has got its own entity, its own. So the moment that they pulled the plug, it's likely his consciousness had already gone to the subtle level, and it would have immediately left the body. And it was due to the karma he created. He's already he's found a new mother, and you can't split your consciousness up. So the explanation for me, the only thing that works as an explanation for why people feel the presence of the previous person, feel similar qualities, my feeling is, if you think about it, when I think about a mother giving birth to a child, that a consciousness comes from another life, goes to, so in my case, okay, my consciousness was in a previous body. This is a Buddhist view. And then my mummy and daddy hop into bed, the egg and sperm come together, and my consciousness, due to past karma, goes running like a magnet into that body. So for me to have someone else's body, which is my mummy and daddy's body, really, it's such powerful karmic connection that in that case, of course, there's similarities because our bodies, our genes, but it seems to me the karmic connection between a person who's the recipient, seemingly randomly, of Caden's heart, that there must be some powerful karma from past lives, a strong karmic history, that Caden's heart is going to literally keep that person alive, then of course there's a strong karmic connection between those two people. You don't need the mind to be in that heart, but the karmic connection between them is so strong that the recipient will almost feel or get a feeling for that person. That to me is not surprising, but that would be the explanation. You get my point,
Yeah,
Jane?
thank you. That explains beautifully. And another very quick question. I asked the Manjushri Centre down in Milton if they would put Caden into the saw ceremony to support his.
Wonderful,
So,
wonderful.
and then just a quick question, because I don't know a lot about the saw ceremony at the moment. It's not something that I've looked into. I attend the Manjushri Centre. But how does that help the karma?
I understand, darling. I think the only way to understand all of this, and this is why to understand even all the practices that Lama Zopa recommends and all the lamas would recommend. I mean, all these, all these Buddhas, there are so many enlightened beings all flying around, so many enlightened beings, and and one of the major practices among Tibetan Buddhists, not just Tibetan Buddhists, but certainly among Tibetan Buddhists, having confidence in the presence of these Buddhas. And so then when you do prayers and practices related to those Buddhas, because Buddhas are such powerful, compassionate beings, they're capable of helping many beings. So even just, even those words, when my friend died, my friend was close to death in a coma. My friend, I told you, Judy, I just said the names of these holy beings, and these lamas are meant to be like Buddhas. Or you just say a mantra of a Buddha, that can be bringing the energy of the Buddhas to that person and to support them and help them. I mean, Buddhas are capable of helping beings, So it's a very practical thing. It's really in this sense, it's very similar to the Christian teachings about praying to the saints and Our Lady and God, and their energy is powerful. And so by invoking their power, it brings their power there. It's a very similar idea, I'd say. Do you understand me?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much,
Yeah, good.
Robina, and thank you for your talk last week at Manjushri as well.
Oh, good, darling. Yeah, that's right. And I forgot you the week before. That's right. So what
That's all right. We were prepared then.
Oh, darling. So I think when we finish tonight, we can sing a little prayer. We can do the medicine Buddha practice for for Caden and other people we want to pray for as well. We can do that together. There's 5 minutes at the end. We can do that. So people, I mean, I think that one of the mantras is really, you see the benefit, animals especially. I mean, so many times people have told me the benefit of just having a mantra playing. I mean, and even for the simple reason for people, because when you're old or sick, and even a pet too, your mind naturally is very distracted. But as soon as you put a pleasing sound, just a pleasing sound, and it happens to be a mantra, that can energize their mind to focus, and therefore calm them. But if your mind's scattered all over the place, or even just one kind word to somebody, I mean, I always think about all the old people in the old people's homes where they're like turned into veggies, and many have no family, no one to help them, and they're so distressed. Even just the cleaning lady being kind to them with one kind word can make all the difference, It's so easy to help dying people, sick people. Just give them some love. Just love somebody. Give them affection and love. And the animal as well can calm their mind down,
I have a question.
Yes, Wendy.
What are the thoughts on I've been learning a lot about medical aid in dying. What are your thoughts on, the prescription that can be given to someone that is dying that they can take themselves and
I
their
understand,
life?
darling. It's a very big issue in Buddhism. Let's just discuss it. It's a very good point. So on the one hand, okay, so the basic idea in Buddhism, as I said very briefly, at the time of death, unless you're a highly developed practitioner, you've never thought of death. You've got masses of fear. Fear is the most common thing at the time of death. And the Buddhist view is to die with the mind gripping with fear, freaking out, unhappy, worried, anxious, attached, angry, whatever. That literally it instantly will trigger a negative karmic seed that will then cause the person to get a suffering rebirth. This is the basis of the logical reasons from the this Tibetan Buddhist perspective of why why it's just not it's just not appropriate to take your own life or to kill someone else, including your pet, simply not on in a sense, not it's not a moralistic issue. Oh, you shouldn't kill. It's more that nobody has, unless you've got the wisdom, and that's very rare to have that wisdom, but if you're a highly evolved being, you do have that wisdom. Nobody has got the wisdom, the confidence that at the time of death of your pet, at the time of death of your mummy who's going to take the pill, that your mind will be peaceful and virtuous and will trigger a virtuous karmic seed that will with certainty give you a happy rebirth. It's a practical issue, Wendy, and it's like playing Russian roulette basically with that person. That's the logic behind it. It's not like you're naughty because you shouldn't do it. If you have the wisdom to know with confidence that if you kill your mummy now, the virtuous karma will be there and she'll get a really good human rebirth, then honey child, please kill me now, you know. It's a practical issue. So it's just that it's playing with fire because we don't have certainty of what the karma is for that person at that particular time. We don't have that level of wisdom. So it's a practical issue. In other words, if we're not certain, in general in our lives, we know it's true that if you are not certain about the consequences for the person you're trying to help, that where there could be dire results, you wouldn't take that risk. So if I've got a headache and you have compassion for me, no question, but you just can't remember whether the pill you want to give me is cyanide or aspirin, I'm sorry, I'd rather you keep your pill and let me stay with my headache. So because you're not certain of the consequences. Well, the discussion here is the consequences of dying at a certain time, not knowing the karma that will be triggered for that person as to whether the suffering rebirth or a good rebirth will come. It's a bit abstract for most of us in the West because we don't think like this, but that's the issue behind it. Do you see what I'm saying? So best is to help the person. Best, I mean, it's not because, you still can't guarantee that your mummy, whom you help die peacefully and without giving a pill, will get a good rebirth. But at least you can take the time, including for your pet, to do the things to keep their mind relaxed and calm. I mean, it's not certain. You can't be certain because some people do die with incredible agony. The pain is unbearable. I can't imagine the pain of some people, which is usually why people choose to die, So it's the thing behind it from the Buddhist perspective is it's like playing Russian roulette with somebody. You're not, and even if for yourself, for your own mind, if you decide I'm going to take a pill now, because you don't have the wisdom to know the karma you've got. So it's better. The idea is in the Buddhist view is to help the person be peaceful each moment, quietly going, and allow them to die according to their own pace. But I mean, it's not always what you can't make. The world is changing radically now, and it's such a common thing. And many people I know, including Buddhists, are choosing to do this. So it's what to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have 10
This is
left,
the thing for me now. Hang on a second. That's the thing for me. One person who in fact died naturally, totally devoted Buddhist, loved her practice, but was in terrible agony. I mean, literally in such unbearable agony. And she told me that she didn't want to talk to me about it because she was afraid I'd tell her not to do it. But of course, I would never tell her not to do it. But she emailed me, I love you so much, but I think I've decided to do whatever they call it in Canada, And so, of course, I told her what practices to do. I can't say to her, I'm not going to help you. I'm not trying. I can't think. I wasn't facilitating her to kill herself, but of course I was going to help her. She told me, but in fact she died naturally anyway. But I told her the prayer to do, and of course I'd help a person if they came to me. It's not a moralistic issue. Do you understand my point? It's just dangerous. We just don't. It's just uncertain. That's all. It's not. It's just not. It's just to be careful. That's the reason behind it. Not like, oh, I shouldn't kill somebody. It's wrong. We shouldn't be fundamentalists like that. Do you understand? I mean, even one time, the same with killing. A friend of mine years ago, a nun, told me that this girl she was helping who wanted to have an abortion. It's the same of killing a baby in the womb. It's a baby that came into your womb at the time of conception. It's a little fetus, 9 months old. It's a human being. And of course, you don't want to kill the person because you don't know the karma for the person as well. So it's killing. From the Buddhist point of view, it's killing. But she had decided to do it. So, you know, my friend rang Lama Yeshe, and then Lama Yeshe rang her and gave her a Tara meditation to do before she had the abortion. So he helped her, you know. It's not a moralistic thing like you're naughty, you shouldn't do it, I'm not going to help you. That's heavy. Do you understand?
I
Do you understand the
understand.
issue behind it? It's just, it's a bit like Russian roulette, but there's no certainty everyone's going to get a good rebirth just because you don't kill them. So it's just to know that, I mean, this process, it's just to know what's going on as much as we can, you know, and to be wise in how we decide these things. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Denise, let's do a little practice, shall we, to finish?
Yeah, we have about 8 more minutes. I do, if anybody has a question before we do this practice, please let's get to that. And then we will do our practice and include Kaden with us.
Yeah, it's a very short one. So I don't think anybody we know who's
Do you have a question?
who's that?
I had a question, Denise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hi, Robina. It's Rachel. So
Hello,
I just wanted to kind of go over, you said that for 3 days, the Buddhists believe that the consciousness can still be in the body. So my question is, number one, what are they doing with the body? Like, how
Who?
can you
What's who doing with the
respect?
body? Sorry.
What's that?
I mean, what does one do with the body during those 3 days?
Correct.
Oh, I see. Okay. No, you basically the Tibetan Buddhist one, you'd leave the body, you'd leave like your mummy in the bed and have prayers done every day for her, have the people, I mean, even in the monasteries, they rotate 24 hours a day, the monks and nuns coming in, saying mantras, saying prayers, because her mind is still in the body, and that can still help them shift their karma, you know, and ensure they get a better human rebirth. That's usually what you'd do. You'd stay with
They
the
will
body.
leave the body. Okay.
Pardon? You'd
They
what?
will leave the body then for at least 3 days.
Oh, that's very typical among Tibetan Buddhists, yes. But not everybody, I mean, not everybody would do it, but that's very typical among, if a Tibetan, yeah, people who have that view and will have their mother there, stay there, and have people come and take turns saying prayers and things. But that's how it was when I was a Catholic. My grandmother, I mean, at least 2 days before they moved, all the nuns came and did prayers, similar type of thing, you know. Yes, and even I know one time when my sister died, one of my sisters died, she fell down the stairs and messed up her brain, and they kept her breathing. When I got to the hospital, I mean, I went quickly home. And they kept her breathing, and then you know they stopped her breath, and she stopped breathing. They took the machine off. So the nurse was very sweet. All my sisters had left because they were all thought I was stupid. Not stupid, but they all laughed at me. Robina, she's dead, they said. Robina, she's dead. I said, I know that, darling. I just want to say some prayers. So I stayed with my sister for about 4 hours. And then the nurse said I had to go. But the nurse was Burmese and she was Buddhist. So I said to her, would you please leave? And there was going to be an autopsy anyway. So they had to leave the body. So I just asked her if they could please move the body very gently, not to disturb her body, and to keep her in the mortuary without, you know, so not to disturb her body. If you're going to move her very gently. And the nurse promised that they'd do that for her. So they kept her in the morgue for a couple of days, and then they did the autopsy. So that's so I can have prayers and practices done during those days. Do you understand, Rachel?
Yes. And then I was just curious, the consciousness, what do the Buddhists believe? You know, the consciousness you're saying goes into another body, but how long can that be when you're doing
Oh, I see. No, okay.
reincarnation?
The way they're describing the process in the Vajrayana system, which is the Tibetan Buddhist system, it's you know, it takes up to, so you go through the process of the dying process can usually the dying process typically starts a couple of hours before you stop breathing, although it could be much longer. And then once you stop breathing, it's up to 3 days that the consciousness goes through these subtle stages and gets to the very subtle level and just kind of stays there. But the karma of determining their next rebirth has already been triggered. So they're just sort of twiddling their thumbs there, but unconscious, of course. And then when the mind leaves the body, it goes through this kind of reverse process, a bit like waking up in a dream. Then there's this, what they call the intermediate state in between lifetimes, which can take up to 49 days. And so that's called the bardo, or the intermediate state. And literally, experientially, it's just like a dream, but very vivid. And then when your new mother and father hop into bed or whatever, sometimes you don't have to be more than 1 second. You know, you can say very quickly in this intermediate, so it can be up to 7 weeks. When your new mother and father, if you're going to be born a human, they hop into bed and your mind then leaves that intermediate state and goes running to the egg and sperm, and you enter the egg and sperm, right? That's what conception is. At the time of conception is when the consciousness comes from the intermediate state straight to the egg and sperm. So it's never more than a couple of months, never more than a couple of months between death and rebirth. Could be very shorter. Never. And of course, rebirth is not just as a human. It could be as an animal, could be as a spirit, like ghosts and things. That's a very suffering type of rebirth. And other kinds of rebirth, like God realms, which is a bit like heaven. There's different types of rebirths as well that they can take. But sometimes it can be very quick. Sometimes it can be up to a couple of months, never more. That's the Buddhist view.
Thank you.
All right, darling. So why don't we just very simple, just close our eyes and imagine in the sky this one aspect of the Buddha. It's called Medicine Buddha, and he's blue, dark blue. So it looks like Buddha, a nice body, and he's sitting there in meditation, and he's holding a kind of his begging bowl. It's kind of got, you think of it's got nectar in it, like medicine. And there's a mantra. So we just imagine the medicine Buddha. And all the Tibetan doctors always do this practice every morning before they see their clients, their patients. So we just visualize powerful, I'll say the mantra, just visualize powerful, healing, dark blue light goes out and into Caden, into all the beings we're praying for, the animals, all the suffering creatures in the universe, all the sick people, all the dying people, enters in, and all of us as well, into all of us, completely purifying all of our suffering and purifying all our delusions and purifying all our sickness and healing us and helping Caden, find a good rebirth and all of that, and everybody else. Taya Taum Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Ranza Samungate Swaha. Taya Taum Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Ranza Samungate Swaha. Taya Taum Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Ranza Samungate Swaha. Taya Taum Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Ranza Samungate Swaha. Taya Taum Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Ranza Samungate Swaha. So you now imagine Medicine Buddha just dissolving into radiant blue light that pervades the universe and melts into all of us, completely healing all of us, purifying all of us, blessing all of us. Okay, people, that's all. Much love, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Again, our classes are taught by donation. Robina will receive anything that you put a mark on with her name for that. If you'd like to Zelle anything to ourmetaverse@gmail.com, we appreciate it.
And I'll send you, by the way, I'll send you a few course notes just with a few of the excerpts from the book. I'll send this to you in the, I'll send to you, Denise, and if you'd like to send to everybody, you're very welcome.
Sure, will do.
I'll do that for you. Some notes, I'll do that. Okay.
Everybody's invited back. We hope that you broadened your mind and got something out of this that you wish to get out of this. I did put Robina's class that she'll be teaching next week on Facing Death Without Fear in a retreat. That's going to be out of SoCal, California.
That's right. We'll do a 3-day retreat, I think, yeah.
And please let us all take the merit that we earned tonight by coming together with such a positive motivation, and immediately send that out to all suffering beings everywhere without exception. And may all wars end immediately.
That's exactly right. Thank you, darling people. So kind. Thank you for having me, Denise, and all of you. Bye. Much love, everybody.
Thank you again.
And keep remembering, today we could die tonight, and then if you wake up in the morning, you rejoice. Amazing. I can't believe my petrol tank hasn't run out yet. It's the only way to go. And then you get excited to want to use the rest of the day. Keeps you on the alert, okay?
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Bye, darling.
Bye-bye, everybody.